My parents came back into my life because they thought I married a rich boss. So I played along and taught them a lesson. I'm 27 years old and work as a financial consultant at a large company. I haven't spoken to my parents in 8 years. I have an older sister, Celeste, who's 34. She's happily married with 2 kids. We talk occasionally, but we're not particularly close. When I was 19, something happened that made me completely cut ties with my parents. The thing is, my parents are devout Catholics. They took religion extremely seriously and raised us in a very strict way. Instead of sending us to regular schools, they homeschooled us because they believed local schools didn't align with their values. They had a very specific vision for our lives and pressured us to follow one of 2 paths, either become mothers to many children or join a convent. To them, these were the only acceptable options for us within the traditions of their community. My sister, being 7 years older, never dated, lived at home until her wedding, rarely traveled more than 15 kilometers from our neighborhood, and hardly interacted with the outside world. No surprise, she was their golden child. At 22, they arranged her marriage to Matthew, the son of my father's friend. At the wedding, they nitpicked everything: the scripture readings, the order of the Mass, even though it was led by an ordained priest. Fortunately for my sister, Matthew turned out to be a great guy, and she has a good life now with wonderful kids. Watching her get married so young made me realize I wanted something completely different. She might have been content with her path, but I had dreams, ambitions, and a hunger for independence. I wanted to build a career, travel, and see the world. But my vision of life was in direct conflict with my parents' beliefs. After finishing our homeschooling, I wanted desperately to attend university. Despite their firm no, I applied to one of the best colleges in the area and was thrilled to receive a full scholarship. When I told them, they exploded. My father went into a rage. He screamed, filled with condemnation and disappointment. My mother wouldn't even look at me. They couldn't understand why I would want to study when, in their view, I should have been focusing on following their plan. It was heartbreaking to see my own parents so violently reject my dream. That argument marked the beginning of a deep rift between us that lasted for years. It was clear that my dreams were completely incompatible with their expectations. That was the turning point where our relationship fell apart. Going to college opened up a new world for me. I learned things that challenged the beliefs I'd been raised with. I made new friends and finally experienced the independence I had always longed for. My parents hated this change. They saw my growing autonomy as a threat to their values. Every visit home during breaks was tense, full of unspoken conflict. I felt like I was walking on eggshells, trying to avoid triggering another argument. The gap between us grew, and eventually we couldn't find common ground anymore. Even though a part of me still craved their approval, it became a fantasy I had to let go of. After college, I was excited about starting my career. I told them I planned to get a job and move out to pursue my dreams, but they were not happy. They pushed me to get married and start having children, clinging to their beliefs. Our arguments got worse. Emotions ran high, and they begged me to reconsider. When I refused, they told me to leave their house immediately. I was shocked by how harsh and cruel their reaction was to a decision that made me so happy. I packed up my things and moved in with my sister for a few months until I found my own place. At that point, I promised myself I would never return to my parents' home. I wanted to live by my own rules, to find happiness and success outside of their narrow expectations. My choice hurt them deeply, and in response, they completely cut me off. Since then, I haven't asked my sister about them, and she never brings them up either. Now, here's where the real story begins. I'd been dating my boyfriend for 3 years. 3 months ago, he proposed. We decided on a small courthouse ceremony followed by a simple dinner with close friends. I've never liked big, flashy weddings, and the fact that I couldn't invite my family only made me more committed to keeping it low-key. Everything was going smoothly until I received a call from an unknown number. I answered, and to my shock, it was my parents. After all these years of silence, I couldn't believe it. They said they heard about my wedding and wanted to congratulate me. I thanked them, trying to stay calm, though emotions were swirling inside me. They asked how I was doing, and I responded without much enthusiasm. Then they asked what it was like being married to someone who held such a high position at my company. Confused, I asked what they meant. That's when they happily said they were so proud I'd married my boss. My jaw nearly hit the floor. I had no idea where they got that idea from. Apparently, someone told them I married my boss and they were over the moon. I stayed mostly silent while they gushed about how proud they were, how happy they were that I was finally married. My father was eager to meet my husband, and my mother asked if I planned to quit my job to focus on being a wife and mother. I was stunned. It slowly became clear that the only reason they wanted to reconnect after 8 years was because they thought I had married someone wealthy and influential, someone they deemed worthy. Now they expected me to be a perfect, traditional wife. Their condescending tone and expectations infuriated me. But instead of confronting them, I decided to play along. I painted a picture of our life, partly true, but mostly fantasy. Yes, my husband and I live comfortably, but I told them we had 20 maids, a giant mansion with a pool, and so on. They soaked up every word, thrilled by the story. Their excitement grew even more when they begged me to arrange a meeting with my rich husband. Their desperation to reconnect was pathetic, especially since it was built entirely on a lie. But I smiled and agreed to set up a meeting that weekend. In that moment, a plan began to form in my mind. I wanted to teach them a lesson, to make them realize the pain they caused by rejecting me just because I didn't live up to their expectations. And now they suddenly wanted to come back into my life, but only to show off in front of their church friends. It was bitter, and I was determined to show them the consequences of their actions. I discussed my plan with my husband, but he hesitated. He understood why I had lied, but questioned whether it was right to start our relationship with my parents based on a lie. After all, it was their first meeting. After some persuasion, he agreed to play along. I also approached my boss. Yes, my boss was a woman. Over the years we'd worked together, we'd become good friends. I explained the situation to her, and she was amused by what was happening with my parents. I asked if I could use her house for a day, and she gladly agreed. I sent my parents the address and set up the meeting they had so eagerly requested. On the day of the meeting, my parents arrived at the house, fully convinced they were about to meet my wealthy boss, whom I had supposedly married. Their eyes widened with surprise at the size of the house and its vast lawn. My husband and I met them at the entrance. My father shook my husband's hand with such vigor it seemed like he wanted to tear it off. My mum hugged me and congratulated me on my marriage. Although my husband had his doubts initially, he played his role flawlessly. He greeted my parents warmly, engaged in casual conversation, and pretended to be the rich boss they believed he was. We sat down at the table, and my parents immediately noticed the staff serving us food. My father began bombarding my husband with questions about the house, his assets, and how I had managed to land a man of such status. Even though I was irritated by the interrogative atmosphere, my husband kept up appearances by fabricating a whole story about his wealth, career, path, and how we met. It was all part of our carefully orchestrated plan. In the middle of the conversation, my father leaned forward with a gleam in his eye and asked, "You know, I've always dreamed of seeing a classic car collection. Do you happen to have a few vintage cars I could look at?" My husband played along and said yes, he had a few. The two of them went off to view the collection, which actually belonged to my boss. Meanwhile, my mother stayed behind, came closer, and whispered to me, "You know, we're so happy you married a rich man because we're having trouble paying the mortgage," she said anxiously. "We're afraid we might lose the house." I was stunned, staring at her in disbelief. She continued, "Well, since you're now married to a wealthy man and living in a mansion with vintage cars and servants, maybe you can convince him to help us out." It hit me like a lightning bolt. The only reason my parents reached out after all these years was their hope to benefit from my husband's supposed wealth. They had never truly cared about me. It was a hard realization, and a storm of emotions swirled inside me as I waited for my father and husband to return. Tension filled the air. When they finally came back, I took a deep breath and decided it was time for a serious talk. I turned to my father and asked directly, "Is it true what Mum said?" He hesitated for a moment, then replied, "Well, honestly, I never expected you to get married at all, let alone to a rich man. And now that your husband has everything, it wouldn't hurt if he shared a bit with us." My husband and I were shocked. My father went on, explaining that he really couldn't afford the mortgage and couldn't ask friends for help, it would damage his reputation. Seeing their desperation and belief that they'd easily benefit from my husband's fake wealth, I decided to go through with my revenge. With a sly spark in my eyes, I looked at my father and said, "You know what, Dad? We can help you with the mortgage, but there's one condition. First, you must publicly apologize to me and admit that you were wrong to cut me off 8 years ago. And you need to do it in front of the whole family and friends at a gathering we'll organize." My parents were stunned, but they didn't have much of a choice. Reluctantly, they agreed. Over the next few weeks, I arranged the family event, inviting relatives and close friends. My sister didn't know the full story and was confused why our parents suddenly wanted to reconnect with me. I hadn't told her about the revenge plan, because I knew her moral compass might make her reveal everything. On the day of the event, it felt good to reconnect with my extended family after so many years and to meet my parents' old friends. Everyone congratulated me on the marriage to my supposedly wealthy boss and asked when we'd have kids. Their narrow-minded questions annoyed me, but I smiled politely and answered graciously. Amid the celebration, my father raised a toast. He stood up, lifted his glass, and began talking about how happy he was to be among family and friends. He congratulated us on our marriage, expressed pride in how I had supposedly turned my life around by marrying my boss. He talked about how ashamed he was when I said I wanted a career and how he felt I had disgraced the family. He ended by announcing that now he forgave me because I had finally chosen the path he and Mum always dreamed of. Silence fell over the room. His words echoed, and he didn't realize the night was about to take a very different turn. As he finished, everyone expected me to thank him, but I had other plans. It was time to reveal the truth about the last 8 years. All eyes were on me as I began. "Thank you, Dad, for the kind words and for being here today, but I have something to confess." A murmur went through the crowd. "Yes, I'm married," I continued. "But he's not my boss. My boss is a woman and a close friend. That house you saw, it belongs to her. The wealth, the lavish lifestyle, it was all a setup." I revealed how someone had lied to my parents saying I married my boss and how I played along to see what they really wanted. I explained that this meeting was arranged to tell the truth about our family. My father's expression shifted from proud to shocked. The room was dead silent. I told everyone how my parents had cut off contact with me for 8 years simply because they didn't approve of my pursuit of independence and a career. But the moment they thought I'd married a wealthy boss, they reached out again. I revealed their true motive: financial help to cover their mortgage. They hadn't contacted me out of love or remorse, but to exploit what they believed was my new, rich life. The guests were stunned. As they processed everything, I added that while I hadn't married my boss, my husband and I do live comfortably with well-paying jobs. I emphasized that our financial stability came from breaking free from my parents' control and choosing career over an early marriage and motherhood. The room filled with mixed emotions: surprise, disbelief, understanding, even disappointment. Everyone turned to my parents, who now looked humiliated and exposed. Guests whispered among themselves as my husband and I stood up and left the house satisfied and with a sense of closure. This happened last week, and the aftermath was quite telling. Many people have reached out to support me, praising my courage to speak the truth. But my sister and some relatives think I went too far by publicly humiliating our parents. Maybe I did go too far by playing along with their lie about marrying my boss just to carry out my final revenge. Update 1. Thank you all for responding to my post. After reading your comments and advice, I felt compelled to call my sister and share my perspective. I explained to her that I was only 19 when our parents kicked me out and how that trauma left deep emotional scars for years. Their decision to cut me off was solely based on my desire to pursue higher education and live a different life from what they envisioned. It was incredibly painful. I made it clear that I never judged her for choosing marriage. That path just wasn't mine. I shared how much it hurt to learn the real reason our parents wanted to reconnect after all these years. I asked Celeste if she could ever imagine turning her back on her own children for making a different choice. She seriously replied, "No." I pointed out that, as a mother, she must understand how awful it was for our parents to treat me the way they did. That's why I felt compelled to teach them a lesson they wouldn't forget. Once she heard my side, my sister expressed sympathy for what I went through. I had always kept my feelings to myself, and she never realized the full extent of my inner conflict. Celeste admitted she had no idea how hard it had been all those years. Now she understood why I acted the way I did. While she couldn't fully justify my revenge, she promised not to hold a grudge. After that conversation, I felt lighter. As for our parents, they haven't contacted me since, and I have no intention of making the first move. Given how brutally I exposed them, I can only imagine how furious they must be. Time will tell whether they reflect on their actions and want to rebuild our broken relationship or just continue to blame me. For now, I stand by what I did. I did what I thought was right, and I hope they've learned something. Today, my mum called while I was at work. She said she and my dad felt humiliated in front of everyone and that my dad was still angry. She kept accusing me of lying, but I reminded her that I just played along to reveal their true intentions. Mum tried to justify it by saying they truly believed I was finally going to become a good girl, give up my career, and dedicate myself to a family. I made it clear that I had no intention of doing that, especially now that I'm financially stable and on track for a promotion. I reiterated that I have no regrets. This only revealed my parents' true nature. Mum also said that some of our relatives and friends were now talking about the situation. Some even told them outright that what they did to me 8 years ago was terrible. This, according to her, made my dad even angrier. I didn't want to keep the conversation going, knowing it would go nowhere, so I simply hung up. I had no interest in a pointless argument during my workday. My parents are stuck in their beliefs, and I am in mine. But I was glad that my revelation started to melt the ice not only within our family, but among those who knew what happened. Update 2. It's been 3 months since the last update, and a lot has changed. Following the advice of many of you, I decided to start therapy. I realized that I hadn't properly dealt with my parents' rejection and the deep resentment I carried. Yes, I exposed the truth about their motives, but I didn't want to keep living while clinging to bitterness. Therapy was a step toward healing and processing the past in a healthier way. My parents agreed to meet and talk, mostly because of my sister's sincere efforts. At first, I wasn't sure I wanted to go through with it, but my husband convinced me to give them a chance. We all met at my sister's house. I chose to stay silent until my parents initiated the conversation. My mum spoke first, expressing regret about all our past clashes, which genuinely surprised me. She admitted that she had done a lot of reflection and now realized how much their actions had hurt me. She now understood the pain they had caused. My dad, who had been silent, acknowledged that cutting me off for 8 years was a mistake and said they wanted to make amends. He explained that their strong beliefs had kept them from seeing things from my perspective. I mostly listened. Their words felt sincere, and it was a good starting point. They shared that they had sought guidance from people in their community, which helped them see things differently. It wasn't easy, but I recognized this was the first step toward reconciliation. My sister clearly felt relieved by how the conversation went. She didn't say much, but stayed close and supportive. It was clear how much she wanted us to reconnect. Her optimism gave me hope. Maybe, with time and effort, our family can heal and rebuild. I'll continue therapy and stay open to reconciliation, but I'll proceed with caution. For those wondering, things with my husband are great. Our marriage brings us joy, and he always supports my choices. I'm lucky to have such a partner. We're not thinking about children yet, but we're open to it in the future. For now, we're just enjoying life and traveling the world together. That's all for now. Thank you for listening to this story till the end. Don't forget to follow our channel and take care.